Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to IEP Advocacy. Today is all about how to get your child an evaluation for special education. And so this video is geared towards parents at the very beginning of the special education journey, thinking their child may need services and wanting to know how to go through this process. And so let me just say up front that it is normal to feel overwhelmed with this. There is a lot of information that will come your way. There are a lot of steps that need to happen. Being a parent in and of itself is challenging. And when your child is also struggling and you're trying to find out why and what they need, it is completely normal to feel overwhelmed. And so my first piece of advice is to get yourself some people to help you with this, whether that's family, friends, whether it's you actually hire an advocate or someone near you to help you through this process. Just make sure that you have people around you to support you, to hear you, and to be a sounding board so that you don't feel like you're alone in this. That also being said, it can take time. 2 to 3 months is usually the time frame for the whole process to be completed. And so I have included a step-by-step checklist for you so that as you're going through this, you can make sure that you know where you're at, what's coming next, and that all of the steps are being followed. Now, the very first thing you want to do is send an email to an administrator, your building principal, the special education coordinator or director, and request an evaluation. Do this in writing so that you have record of it, and also make sure to include why you think your child needs to be evaluated for special education services. Within 10 to 15 days, that person needs to get back to you, and they will either accept your request or reject it. Make sure that they do this in a PWN. If they just send you an email, get back to them and request a PWN. That's your prior written notice. It is your formal legal document that outlines everything the school considered, why they're accepting or rejecting your request, and what the next steps are. And you want that because there may be disagreements down the road, and you just want to have everything documented. If they accept your request, if you're in agreement, they'll also send you a consent form, sign that, and get it back right away. If they are rejecting your request for an evaluation, they do not agree with you, you have a couple of options. The first thing I recommend is ask them for a face-to-face meeting. Sit down, look at all the information together, and see if you can come to an agreement. The second is that you can request an evaluation for a 504 plan. A 504 plan isn't as extensive. The key difference is that usually with a child who needs an IEP, who qualifies for special education, they need specially designed instruction. They need services. 504 is usually accommodations and modifications to the general education curriculum to support your child. The evaluation isn't as comprehensive, but it's a good starting place. The next thing, if those don't work out, is to request a mediator. This is an impartial person who comes in from outside of the school district who will sit down with you and the school and try to come to some type of an agreement. If you've exhausted all those resources, the final thing is due process. That is filing a formal complaint against your school district. Okay, so back to if they accepted it. You sign the consent form, you get it back to them. The actual process, the timeline that they have to complete the evaluation is about 45 to 60 days. It depends on your state, so ask. There will be a planning meeting. That meeting is to determine all the evaluations that are going to be done as part of this big comprehensive evaluation. So they'll determine what areas of development they need to be looked at, whether it's social, emotional, behavioral, speech, fine motor, gross motor, academic areas, reading, math, writing. And the planning form that is completed will identify all the areas that are going to be assessed and who is going to do those assessments. You want to be part of this planning process. And so be available for that meeting. At the very least, make sure that you give your input before the meeting and that you get a copy of that planning form so that you can see exactly what assessments, what areas are going to be done. And this is so important because what drives eligibility and what drives then services is the needs that are determined through those evaluations. And so any area that may be impacted by the suspected disability, you want to make sure that that is being assessed. Because if it's not assessed, you don't know if there's a need. And in order to get services, you have to have the data to show that there is a need there for your child. Okay, so you have that planning form, the timeline kicks off, the school starts scheduling and conducting those evaluations. They're going to set a meeting, and this is your eligibility meeting. This is the meeting that's going to happen once all of the evaluations are done. And that's where you'll sit down with the whole team to look through the results of the evaluation and determine eligibility. Make sure that you request to get a draft a few days, a week prior to that meeting. And you're still going to walk through all of the results in that meeting. That's the primary purpose of the meeting. But it's a lot of information to take in. And so if you get that draft ahead of time, you can look through it, you can make notes, you can kind of highlight your questions or areas you'd like for the school to elaborate on. And it just makes the meeting go that much more smoothly because you're not trying to digest all of this information in the moment. You're going to be able to get a heads up prior and come to the meeting a bit more prepared. In the actual eligibility meeting, there will be a lot of people at the table. All of the educators who completed evaluations, usually a couple of administrators. And so it is a pretty big team typically within those eligibility meetings, usually the largest that you'll have throughout the special education process. And so just know that it is completely normal to feel overwhelmed in that meeting. There's a lot of people, a lot of data, a lot of comparing your child to what they should be doing, what their typical peers are doing, and that is hard. And so also in your preparations, I would recommend just taking a moment to think through and maybe even write down the ways that you know your child needs help. You are their parent, you know them best. Go into that meeting feeling confident in the ways that you know your child is struggling and where you think that they need services so that you can communicate that clearly to the team. In that meeting, they will go through all of the evaluations. It'll be long. Make sure you have a coffee beforehand, or better yet, take one with you. And once that is done, you'll determine if your child is eligible or not for special education. If they are found eligible, they'll also be found eligible under a specific category. That's the specific disability, like autism or learning disability. And so that category is not as important as the evaluation. I have a whole video around this. The actual needs that are identified within that comprehensive evaluation that was done is more important than the category. So don't get super hung up on what your child is found eligible for special education under. And then with that eligibility, there also needs to be the development of an IEP, of an individual education program, and the team will get to work on that right away. Now, if your child is not found eligible for special education and you disagree, you have the right to an IEE, that's an independent educational evaluation. And that is when at the district expense, so this is to no cost to you, when you have a disagreement, you don't agree with the evaluations that were done or the outcomes of the evaluations, the district will pay for someone outside of the school to do similar or the same evaluations on your child. And then what will happen is once those are done, the whole team, including that independent evaluator, will come back together to look through all of this new information and determine steps moving forward. If you still are not in agreement, that's when things like mediation and due process, those formal complaints, come back into the picture. And that is the whole process. And like I said, there's that step-by-step checklist in the description box below that you can print out and just keep somewhere handy so that you can follow along as you go through this, because it does take some time. And just make sure that you are being an informed participant with the team, that you are proactive, and that you use whatever support system you need to navigate this whole process, because it is a lot and it is overwhelming, and it is perfectly normal to feel that way. I hope this was helpful to you. Please join me again really soon. Take care.